I'm Amanda.
And I'm Missy, and this is Real Sisters Rewind.
Join us as we go back to the 80s.
Hey, sister.
Hey, sister, how are you?
Good. How are you? Have you had a good weekend?
I've had a great weekend. You look beautiful, as always, with your blue and white.
Thank you.
Did you do anything special?
Nothing really special. I had a dear friend who came in to spend last night, and she went to church with us, and then we met Morgan and Catherine for lunch, and it was lovely. What about you?
Nothing special. I drove yesterday in the car for about 8 to 9 hours to pick Savannah up and drive her back home from Louisiana Girls State. So
she had a great time?
She had a great time.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Well, welcome to Real Sisters Rewind, back to the 80s, a podcast for people who love movies and wish they were as good now as they were back then. If this is your first time joining us, we are sisters that love great movies and think that some of the very best of all time are from the 80s. We're rewatching and reliving some of our favorites from that time. I'm Missy.
And I'm Amanda. And if it's your first time listening, be sure to go right now, pause, and like and subscribe.
Yes.
Today, we are diving into one of not only our most beloved, but one of the most beloved dance films of all time, Dirty Dancing.
Love it.
I know. And this film is set in the summer of 1963. This was a time of social change just before the Beatles invaded America. It tells a story of a timeless love story, and it's of growth and, of course, dancing. The music throughout the film really became a cornerstone of its popularity, which we'll talk about today, as it adds so much to the emotional depth and storytelling.
Very good summary, sister.
Oh, thank you. But before we get into the story, let's share some fascinating facts about this iconic movie and what was actually happening in the year of 1987. In 1987, I was actually 11 years old. Missy, how old were you?
I had just turned 19 years old. It was the summer between my freshman and sophomore years in college.
Okay, so you were in college already.
Yes.
And there was a lot going on in the world. This was kind of controversial, I remember, which is kind of funny now because the world seems so much smaller. But I guess because this was such an American thing, Disneyland Paris opened in
Yes, I remember that. A lot of people were offended.
Yeah, it's like what is Disneyland doing over there?
Right.
So that happened in 1987. Ronald Reagan was president.
Yes, he was.
That was the year he made his plea to Mikhail Gorbachev, where he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And as we know now, they finally did, thank goodness.
Yes.
And then see if you remember this.
Okay.
There was a little baby girl named Jessica who fell into a well.
Yes, Jessica, the baby in the well.
Yes, in Midland, Texas. And it was all over the news before there was a 24-hour news cycle. But it was all over the news, and they did finally rescue her.
I remember that. All the rescue workers were there, and they had that child, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal.
Very big deal, yes.
So talking about 1987, the week that Dirty Dancing came out, Madonna she held the number one song with Who's That Girl?
Who's that girl?
There you go. But there was another singer who made the cover of People magazine, and it was in order to commemorate the 10th anniversary of his death. Amanda, it was Elvis Presley.
Oh my gosh, that is so crazy because when I was that age, Elvis Presley to me was like from the dark ages. I loved him. I loved everything about Elvis was really interesting to me, but it seemed really, really, really long ago.
Like he was an old-fashioned singer or something.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
old Tommy days. Yes. Wow. 10th anniversary that year.
Yeah.
Well, Dirty Dancing was released in theaters on August 21st, 1987. And it was directed by Emile Ardolonio, doing the best I can on that last name.
You did well.
Thank you. And written by Eleanor Bergstein.
Amanda, did you know that she wrote it based on her own life? Her dad was a doctor. They used to vacation in the Catskills, and she was called Baby.
I did not know that. That
Yeah.
is fascinating to me. And I remember like watching that movie and thinking about like, who would be called baby and what, like, it just seems so strange to me, but that is fascinating. That was actually loosely based on her experience. Cool.
Yes. Well, the film starred the late, the great, the ever so talented Patrick Swayze, and of course, Jennifer Grey.
The ever so talented and fine Patrick Swayze.
Yeah, fine. That's right.
The film was rated PG-13, thank goodness, because then I was
Yes.
able to see it. And has a runtime of an hour and 40 minutes.
It could have kept running for me.
Me too. It was made on a pretty low budget of about 6 million, but went on to gross over 64 million in the United States and about 214 million worldwide. So they did really well considering the budget.
Yeah, sounds like they made their money back plus a little, right?
Mhm.
Dirty Dancing was nominated for many awards, including a Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture, Comedy or Musical, and Best Performance by an Actress and also an actor, meaning Jennifer and Patrick, in a comedy or musical performance. But they didn't win. Wah, wah.
Wah wah. But I was thinking about, actually, I was looking over our list of movies that we are thinking about watching, rewatching.
Right, right.
And there's a lot of movies in 1987. So I was just thinking about the competition that they
Yeah.
had for that year.
Yeah, it was a big year.
Mhm. But they did have a big win at both the Golden Globes and the Oscars for Best Original Song.
Yep. And even Patrick Swayze, who played Johnny Castle, got in on the music. He co wrote and performed She's Like the Wind.
Through my dreams.
Right. And this film features some of the most memorable songs of the 80s, including I've Had the Time of My Life, which won an Academy Award and a Golden Globe for the Best Original Song. And the soundtrack itself, Amanda, went multi platinum and became one of the best selling albums of the decade.
It's incredible. And not only does it have some of those really memorable 80s songs, but the music from that time period was incredible as well. I loved that just as much. Well, you were right, sister, about this best-selling album of the decade and how incredible it was. And we have a surprise for all of our Dirty Dancing fans. We had the privilege to speak with our friend, Mr. Donnie Markowitz, about the creation of the award-winning song, The Time of My Life.
All right, so let's listen to that clip now.
All right, everyone, we are so lucky to have a very special guest with us today. Our guest was the co-writer of the music for the Academy Award-winning song, I Had the Time of My Life, from Dirty Dancing, Mr. Donnie Markowitz.
Woo-hoo! We are so excited that you are here with us. We are ready to jump in and learn, aren't we, sister?
Yes, an honor to have
So honored.
here with us. And I do want to just say quickly, how I have this wonderful connection is I had the privilege of teaching Donnie's son when he was in the third grade. And he was
Precious.
just a joy. Yes, such a joy in my life. And it was so fun getting to know their family when I was teaching back before the COVID times. So thank you so much for being here with us. And it looks like, are you in your studio?
I'm in my studio in Mid-City, New Orleans.
Right.
Mm.
Coming to us from New Orleans, where I
I don't,
am.
the only thing I can say, I'm so used to calling you Miss Amanda, that I find it hard to just call you Amanda, but I'll do my best.
Yes, you can just call me Amanda. You do not have to call me Miss Amanda or Miss Stevens or any of that. Okay, here's my first question for you. And it's so funny. We've known each other for a long time.
Yep.
And even before I was your son's teacher, you knew my husband through baseball at,
Yeah,
the
we
park and
coached
all that.
in the Little League together.
Yes. And so we've never really talked about any of this, and it's also fascinating to me. So my first question that we're wondering is, how did you even become involved with the project of this particular song? Like, how did this all happen?
Well, it was a simple, simple twist of fate that I was playing softball with a friend of mine, and he knew that I had a little recording set up in my apartment in New York City. And his name is John D. Nicola. And he asked me if I wanted to write a song for a movie, which I had never done before. I was a working bass player in New York City at the time, and this is back in 1986. And so I said, sure. So he came over. So, as is always the case, it was up, I lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and the bedroom was my studio, and I lived in the rest of it. So it had to be, if it was a mess, I would have probably said, no, let's not do it, but it was okay. So I said, yeah, come on over.
My apartment's clean, so yeah, I'll do a song for you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
The apartment was okay, and but so so we were talking about it, and he told me what the parameters were, that it had to be 5 to 6 minutes long, start off slow, get into a dance groove, sound like it could be 1962 or 1987.
Mm.
And
Interesting.
A little bit of a challenge there.
that was the assignment, to write a song like that. And I'd written songs for the bands, the rock and roll bands that I had played in over the few years before that. But like I said, I wasn't in the songwriting business or knew anybody in the film business. It was just random. And so before John came over to the house, to the apartment, I sat down and I wrote it in 20 minutes. I just sat down, and the music came out in 20 minutes. And he came over, and we put some sprinkles on this and that and this and that and this. And then we submitted it and gave it to Frank Previtt, who is the lyricist. And he was listening to the cassette of what we had done, driving down the New Jersey Turnpike, and came up with the lyrics in his head. So we
Wow.
got together at my apartment, made a demo, and submitted it. And I didn't hear anything, and that was my whole connection to the project, was that way. So I knew nobody, and I didn't read the script, but I knew, it took place in the Catskills, and it was, roughly 1962, and blah. And I'd been to Grossinger's, which was a popular resort back then. when I was little, my grandparents had taken us there, and for some reason I had a memory of it. But nonetheless, we didn't hear anything, and then a couple weeks later they said, "Oh, they loved it. It's going to be in the movie, and here's $5,000, and you guys keep the publishing." Which in the business means you keep the ownership of it, which is really cool because we get paid to this day royalties. And
We were
usually,
going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
usually film companies will give you more money, but keep the publishing, and you do
Right.
okay. But this was one where it was a small film company and they didn't have much of a budget. So that was a reasonable deal to me. And I didn't even know what was or what wasn't, but said, okay. So nonetheless, that was it. So I heard the song's going to be in the movie. And finally, one day, towards the end of the year, I get a single in the mail, and they recorded it with Bill Medley and Jennifer Warnes in Los Angeles. And I listened to it, and I said, wow, look at that. They made a record out of my song. And wow, that's pretty good. Bill Medley was from the Righteous Brothers, and I'm going,
Yeah.
wow, that's
Cool.
cool. And Jennifer Warren, she had a couple of hits back then, was a big session singer in Los Angeles. So I was like, wow, I got a record, a real live record. My name's on and everything, and still didn't hear from anybody or anything, connected with the movie. And
Wait. I have a question. I got to back up for a second. When they told you it needed to be like it could sound like it was from the early 60s or the 80s,
yeah,
how much of a challenge was that? Because one of the questions I was going to ask you, because so much of the music in the movie is from that time period.
yeah.
And so did that like hinder you at all? Or did that, I mean, obviously not. You wrote
Did
it,
it
you
in
said
20
like 20
minutes.
minutes.
Yeah.
But that seems so difficult to me to like pair those two.
Well, I like to say it took me 20 years to be able to write it in 20 minutes. But
Oh.
you know what I mean?
Yep.
But I looked at it analytically, where, okay, what was going on musically in the pop world in 1962? It was before the Beatles. So a lot of that, and what was going on in those resorts was a lot of Latin music. Tito Puente and those guys were playing in 1962. So it was Latin influence. And
Oh,
so that's where that came from. And I was influenced by who else but Michael Jackson, and that was going on in 1987,
yep.
right?
Yes.
And so the Quincy Jones and the rhythms that were going on in the mid to late 80s, were very influential in putting it all together.
Yeah.
Plus, with the technology that we had at the time, to be able to do something in an apartment was very elementary compared to today, where
Right.
anybody can do it if they have a Mac computer.
Yeah.
So
And you're from up there, right? Are you from New York?
I'm from Queens, from New
Okay.
York City, Jackson Heights.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so I'm sorry, I interrupted you. So you got this and you got the
Got the
tape.
record.
Yeah, you got it in the
Yeah, so
mail.
we got it, played it, and I said, wow, this was great. And I heard they were going to release it and in the springtime, and still no contact with anybody, blah blah blah. At the time, my first wife and I walked down to Tower Records
Yes.
on 65th Street and Broadway at the time. And it was now, this was like in August, and they had announced the release of the film and the release of the album. And on Billboard magazine that week, there was a little picture of the Dirty Dancing album about to come out. And so we're walking around Tower Records. Remember, this is August of 87 and the movie is just coming out.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're in Tower Records, and who's in the shop but what's the guy's name again? Liza Minnelli and Arthur.
Dudley Moore.
Dudley Moore.
Dudley Moore.
I'm sorry, I blanked out. So Dudley Moore's in the store. And my ex-wife knew him from something, and she went over to him and said, look, this is his first thing in business. And he looked at it and said, see you at the Oscars.
Oh my.
That's cool, I didn't really put two and two together, right? So the movie comes out, and I go and see it at the local theater on Broadway and 83rd Street on the Upper West Side, pay my $3.50.
Oh,
And,
yes.
I went with my ex-wife and her sister, watched it, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. Seemed like a chick flick. But, when it got to the end and my name appeared, everybody was excited, and we left, right? And finally, the months go on, and we would walk down to Tower Records every Saturday when it came out to get the Billboard magazine.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, it's number 57. And I say, oh, come on, just make it to the top 40, and then it would be number 42. And then it would be, and by November of 87, around Thanksgiving time, it was number one.
Number
Yep.
one. Casey Kasem's
around the
American
world.
Top 40.
Yeah, it was amazing. The album was number one, and below it said Dirty Dancing, then Bruce Springsteen, then Michael Jackson, then George Harrison. Those were always, and we were above it, above them. And I still have that somewhere, that billboard. But it was quite a surprise, because it was not, it was really I don't know.
Who knew?
Who knew? It's just circumstances and opportunities. And, I like to say that, what made that movie really popular were two things: my bass line and Patrick Swayze's butt.
I love it. I love it.
Gosh, Amanda, that was so great. Thanks for setting that up for us to talk with him. And y'all, this was just a snippet of this incredible interview with Donnie. It was so good that we're going to post it as a bonus episode. Amanda, one thing I wish I would have asked him is the story I heard about the lyricist, Frank Previtt, because I heard he kept saying no to writing a song for the movie Dirty Dancing. Are you ready for why?
Why?
Because he thought it was a pornographic film. Right? But then the head of Millennium Records told him that this would change his life. And indeed it did.
Yes, indeed, it did. Well, here is something interesting that I read about casting that blew me away.
Okay.
Because Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze were both so perfect for this role.
Yes.
Well, Jennifer Grey played Baby Houseman, of course, and she initially was hesitant to take the role because she and Patrick had worked previously together on Red Dawn. And there were some tensions there. They didn't get along great. So she was a little nervous about that. But in the audition, Patrick was actually already cast. Which makes sense because of his amazing dance ability. So he was already cast as Johnny, and he convinced her. He pulled her into the hallway and was like, we can do this, because they had this undeniable chemistry that was just absolutely mind-blowing, incredible, and
palpable.
Wasn't
it? Yes.
Yes. And he told her, we can do this. And apparently he got really emotional and even like had tears in his eyes. And she was feeling, apparently, a little maybe doubtful about this because here's another tidbit. I read from her book, Out of the Corner, that she was dating Matthew Broderick at the time. And the night before the audition, he said to her, "No, you probably won't get it anyway."
What?
Yes.
Way to be a supportive boyfriend, Matthew.
Yes. Right? I was like, what? And but clearly Patrick convinced her, which he would have been able to convince me too.
Yeah, so glad that he did. As great as Swayze was, and we recognize his talent, Val Kilmer was actually offered the role first. He turned it down. And then they were considering Billy Zane, Amanda, that mean boyfriend from Titanic, right, for the role of Johnny. But I mean, come on. Who would have been better in this role than Patrick Swayze? Nobody.
Nobody. This all was just came together so perfectly.
It did. All right. So are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Let's dive into the world of Dirty Dancing.
Okay. Our story kicks off with the Houseman family arriving at Kellerman's, a summer resort in the Catskills. We've got Dr. Jake Houseman, played by Jerry Orbach, his wife Marjorie, and their two daughters, Baby, who we find out later her real name is Frances, and her sister Lisa. Baby is the idealistic young woman with big dreams of joining the Peace Corps, but her summer is going to take an unexpected turn when she meets Johnny Castle.
Johnny Castle.
What a name, Johnny Castle, the resort's dance instructor.
Did you notice when they drove up and they were getting out at this idealistic resort, right, that they've got a lot going on, and there's a guy on the megaphone, Amanda, and he's like, charades on the back lawn or something like that. Did you recognize who that person was?
I sure did, and I think it was the first time I recognized him because it's like literally I was like, it's Newman.
It's Newman from Seinfeld. It was so great. Okay, I have to say one other thing, Amanda.
Wait, he was also in Jurassic Park.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
The last episode.
Yeah. Just a FYI, we've got to look at our calendars and find a time to go to that resort, because twice a year they do like a big fan weekend for Dirty Dancing, and it's all kinds of fun stuff. So I think that might be some research and development dollars that we need to spend to go and spend some time there, don't you?
That would be so fun. Listeners, let's get a group.
We can get a group and do it. Yes, let us know if you're in. Okay, so they arrive, and then one night, maybe the first or second night there, Baby sneaks out and she stumbles upon a secret after-hours party for the resort staff. The place is buzzing with energy, and the dancing is unlike anything she's ever seen. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, too, sister. It was raw and passionate and incredibly sensual. And Johnny and his dance partner, Penny, played by Cynthia Rhodes, are the stars of the show.
And this is when, sister, I was hooked in. This is when I remember watching as a child and going and just like being so fascinated by this dancing and the music. And it was just amazing to me.
It was incredible. Number one, all I could think about was, I bet that room stinks, right? Like, I don't know, everybody was dancing and sweating, and I bet it stinks in there. But I have to tell you here that I crack up at Baby because the way she got up there was helping Johnny's cousin Billy carry watermelons. And so when Johnny sees her and is like, what's she doing there? She's like, I carried a watermelon. And then when he walks off, she was like, I carried a watermelon. Like, how stupid was that to say, right? Like, I love that line. And I think it's something a lot of people say, like, oh, I carried a watermelon, like when they're embarrassed, right? And then can we just pause here and talk about Penny, that Cynthia Rhodes? Amanda, She is absolutely gorgeous, isn't she?
I was mesmerized by her.
I was then, I was now.
She's beautiful. I wonder if she was really a rockette.
I don't know. You should have researched that.
I should have. I should have.
Well, she certainly is built like one, right?
And a stellar dancer.
When they are in, so I'm going to back up a little bit here. When they are on the first night, they've all arrived and they've got like the big welcome ceremony, and she and Johnny come in and dance. And they're like really getting into the dance where until like the owner's like, cut it. But her first dip is a backwards dip. And honest to goodness, Amanda, her body, she folds backwards into two for that dip. Like, it's like nothing I've ever seen. She is talented. She is beautiful. She was actually in the three biggest dance movies of the 80s. She was in this movie, right? She was in, so she was in Dirty Dancing. She was in Saturday Night Fever. And what was that third one?
Flashdance.
Flashdance. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That's why we're good together. We finished together.
I don't think she was a rockette.
Yeah, I don't think she was either.
But she could have been.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So pick back up. Tell us what's going on.
So speaking of the lovely Penny, her story takes a dramatic twist when she finds out she's got a serious problem. She's pregnant and she's not going to be able to perform.
Okay. Before we go any further, I want to say something right here, Amanda. This podcast is focused on great movies from the 80s. And so we are not going to get into any type of social or moral discussion or debate about this part of the movie. We're just going to focus on the fact that someone was in trouble and baby wanted to help. How's that?
Yeah. And that's perfect because that is such a huge part of who Baby's character is. She's realistic. She's joining the Peace Corps. Like, she just wants to help. And I do have to say, I was 11 when I saw this, and this is when I learned what abortion was.
Yeah. So how does she help? What does she do in that moment?
Well, she goes to her dad to borrow money to help Penny. And it's $250 to be exact.
Do you know that in today's world, it would be $2,500? That's the equivalent of $250 in today.
Okay, well, that makes it even crazier because I always wondered, like, even though it was $250 in my mind, I mean, $250 is a ton. I was always like, where did he get this cash from? Like, there weren't any ATMs, and he was out at this resort. I just thought it was really funny. I don't know.
He probably went to the bank before he went and like loaded up on stacks of money.
I guess, because that's a lot.
It is.
To take to the resort.
It is.
But things do get complicated, and Baby ends up stepping in to learn Penny's dance routine so that she and Johnny don't lose their jobs, and because they have an extra gig at a neighboring resort, the Sheldrake, and she doesn't want them to miss that.
And now is the part in the movie, Amanda, where we begin to see Baby's transformation. She goes from awkward beginner to this confident dancer, right? The training scenes are some of my favorites, and our mom's as well, as she shared with us. But those of her and Johnny, and also her as she practices alone, right? Like coming down from his cabin, and she's alone on the bridge or going up and down the stairs from practice. I love those. And I love how it goes from showing her and her kids, which, by the way, that was a faux pas in the movie because kids weren't around in the 1960s. Right? It goes from showing her in her kid feet to showing her in her dance shoes and her bare feet to then showing her in her fishnet stockings. It's definitely an evolution.
Definitely an evolution. And it's so fun and precious to watch her go through that. But sister, let's talk about what's happening between Baby and Johnny. The chemistry is building.
It is. And you can really begin to see it building on that rainy day when they go down to practice in the water and they're on the log dancing, which, by the way, Patrick Swayze did all of his dancing. There was not a dance double. And Jennifer Grey, Amanda, did all of her own dancing except the log. And I really watched it during the rewatch, and you can tell that it's not her on the log. That somebody's got on that wig, right, that's looking like her.
Yeah.
But you can feel the chemistry really building here when they go and they practice in the lake. I mean, come on, Amanda, when they are in that lake, which, by the way, we think it's summertime, but when they were practicing, the lake was 40 degrees. It was really cold.
It was really cold. That's like breath coming off the lake.
Yeah,
I mean,
and they
you can see your breath coming.
Yeah, they couldn't do any close-ups because their lips were blue, right? But anyway, they're in the lake, they're practicing the lift, and it's just a great moment. But how many times after this movie were you in the pool with somebody and y'all practiced the lift?
Every time, and to this day, my children practice it with their Daddy E in the pool.
Love it.
100%.
Yes, love it, love it.
Can I just say one quick thing about this when
Yes.
you go to the lake? When you're talking about it was raining, every time I watch this, from when I was a child, when I was 11 years old, do you remember his keys are in the car? He's locked his keys in the car. He kicks the pole and he breaks the window. This is so bizarre, but he picks the pole up and the bottom of the pole is muddy.
Yeah.
Where he breaks the window, and it's also right to the beat of the music. But the mud on the bottom of the pole, I was like, how did he get, his hands were muddy after that, and it would drive me crazy. I was like, what? How's he going to get the mud off his hands?
But his hands were muddy or weren't? Because I didn't notice that.
They were. They had to have been from picking up the pole that was in the mud and breaking it. Anyway, it just always drives me crazy.
All right, here we go.
That even to this day, it still drives me crazy. So yes, Swayze, which you talked about, he did all his own stunts and dancing, and he's a trained dancer with
his mom was a dance teacher.
Yeah, with a background in ballet, which made, he had this incredible authenticity that he added to the role, which was really incredible and made it like just could not have been anyone else.
Right. You believed it. Right. You believed it.
Yes.
All right. So they've been practicing, Amanda, for Baby to take over Penny's role. And so now it's time for the big night. And Baby is all dolled up with a face full of makeup, which I remember not liking her with that look. Whenever I was watching it, I thought she's not nearly as pretty with all that makeup on. But she's dolled up and ready for the performance at the Sheldrake, which goes off without a hitch. Well, one hitch, I will say. She doesn't do the lift, but instead she goes into the hitchhiker move, right? Which I don't know about you, but I got some Elaine from Seinfeld moves. You know, Elaine's famous dance where she
but
puts her hitchhiker thumbs out.
Yeah, but without the awkward kicks.
Yes, exactly. And when they return to Kellerman's after it, by the way, I mean, the ride back to Kellerman's when Baby's changing in the back seat of the car back into her regular clothes, he's trying to catch a glimpse in the rearview mirror, right?
He's sneaking a peek, and it's really cute. It's really cute.
He's sneaking a peek. But when they return to Kellerman's, it's chaos, right? Penny had a bad experience with the traveling doctor, and everybody's worried about her. And what does Baby do? What does she do? She's going to step in again and saves the day. She grabs her dad out of his bed and grabs his medical bag, which, by the way, just happens to be right by his bed on vacation.
That's where he keeps the cash, right by his medical bag.
Yes, that's where his stash of cash.
So Dad goes along with baby up to the, up where the workers are staying. And he goes in to see Penny, clears everybody out of the room, takes care of her. But he is pissed when he realizes that the money he gave baby went to this. And he's also pissed that she's been hanging out with the entertainment staff and forbids her of hanging out with those people, quote unquote, ever again.
Yeah. And we can say that he also thinks, or, well, I guess we should say he assumes that Johnny is responsible for Penny's issue, right? But we know it's really Robbie, the preppy boy on the wait staff. He's the one that was headed to med school, and it's actually his responsibility.
Yeah. And after seeing this a gazillion times, I still get so annoyed. It's almost kind of like when you watch, a movie where you think the ending's going to be different and it never is.
Right.
Every time I'm like, why doesn't she just tell her dad that it was Robbie? Like every time. It drives me crazy.
I don't know.
Well, baby is so embarrassed about how her dad treats Johnny in that whole situation.
Yeah.
And so she goes knocking on Johnny's cabin door. Clearly, she's not afraid to sneak out again, even after the Penny shenanigans. And
right, and it just happened. And she's like, knock, knock.
Yeah. He's like, get that makeup off your face before your mother sees you. And then next thing you know, she's at Johnny's. But she does. She goes to Johnny's and she apologizes for her dad's rude behavior. Johnny shrugs it off, no big deal, and tells baby how brave she is for all that she's done to be helping them in the situation.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to set the scene here, sister, because this whole time there's been some music playing in the background during this conversation, right? And he's telling baby, you're the bravest, right? All of that, right? And then all of a sudden you hear that old fashioned sound from a record player where
it goes scratch.
Like, I don't know. I don't have great sound effects with that, but another record falls and it's Cry to Me. And baby asks Johnny to dance with her. And he says, what, here? And let's just say that it leads to one of the steamiest dance scenes, both on their feet and under the covers of all time, right? But here's the thing, Amanda. I was watching it, and I had one of the times I watched it, my husband, Chris, and my mother-in-law were in the room. As sensual as that scene is and steamy, it's also so tame by today's standards. And I have to say, I really appreciated it.
It was so tame. But it was just sexy.
It was sexy.
Like without being overly inappropriate.
Yes, exactly. So now, they are in love.
They are in love. That's also the scene, Missy, when they're talking before this beautiful scene happens. There's a quote. I know there's a lot of quotes in this movie that go down in history, but it's where he's like, you're not afraid of anything. And she's like, me, I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of whatever. And most of all, I'm most afraid of walking out of this room and never feeling the rest of the way I feel the rest of my life when I'm with you or something.
I know it is so good.
And so
good. He's like, well, dang, baby, let's dance.
It's so dramatic. Like,
it's so good. But they're in love. They're in love now.
They're in love. Well, it's not going to be happily ever after because the next morning, Johnny is accused of stealing a guest's wallet. And since he doesn't have an alibi, he's fired. Well, he's been, they threaten him from the get-go that he's been fired. Like he's threatened the whole movie.
That's right.
So once again, baby bravely steps in, which I do think was so brave that she did this. And she stands up for Johnny, providing him with an alibi that she was with Johnny in his cabin the whole night, which is a really big deal. And also, I think that she really was supposed to be back at home because her dad was really mad at her.
He had already been mad at her. Now he's like done. He's furious. And like the sister's getting all the attention from this point on.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, he's like probably super embarrassed. But sidebar,
His daughter was hooking up with the entertainment staff.
we're going to talk about fashion later, but I always love the little white shirt she has on this scene, although it does kind of look like a doily, but it's really cute. I always notice that.
She's so cute. She's so cute. All right. So here's the deal, though. Even though they find the real thieves, that little old couple from the resort, the Schumachers, right? Johnny is fired because of having an affair with one of the guests.
Yeah. And that's when also Baby gets another like little speech where she's like, so I did it for nothing. My father hates me and blah, blah, blah. I did it for nothing.
Yes.
More drama.
More drama.
And this is all crazy because he had been courting Vivian, one of the bungalow bunnies,
Yes.
the whole time. And Max, the owner, knew that these kind of shenanigans were going on. So and he didn't fire him then, but it's Baby. So now he's out.
Wow. Okay, Amanda. So, real quick, I know this isn't part of the actual plot, but I'm just jumping in because somewhere between Johnny and Baby becoming a thing and him being fired was one of my favorite scenes of the movie. Do you want to know what it is?
Yes.
It's where they're practicing to the song. The song is Love is Strange by Mickey and Sylvia. And it's Sylvia. Do you know it? You want to do it with me?
I love it.
I love this scene so much. It's my favorite. So are you ready? Sylvia.
Yes, Mickey.
How do you call your lover boy?
Come here, lover boy.
And if he doesn't answer?
Oh, lover boy.
And if he still doesn't answer?
I simply say,
Baby, wah, wah, wah. It's so great. It's so great, right? I love it.
I do too. It is probably, I mean, people used to like reenact that scene.
Oh, yeah. And here's a fascinating fact, Amanda. This scene was not in the original script, but the director had seen them kind of playing around at warm up and he wanted to capture it for the film.
Oh, they were adorable.
They were. They were.
All right. So picking back up where we left off, Baby tells Johnny goodbye and she watches as he drives away to the song, his song, I might add. She's like the wind. And she's sad, but she's not that heartbroken. I mean, she's kind of like, well, summer romance.
Yeah. And like,
See you later.
They don't have any regrets, but like, and there were no cell phones or anything. Like, I guess as he's driving away, like she's like, oh, well, that was great. I'll never see him again. I mean, did they share numbers? We don't know.
They don't exchange numbers. It doesn't look like, but she
doesn't look like it.
When she's getting ready for that last night and she's sitting on the bed with her sister, she is sad then.
Yeah, she is sad then. And so that takes us right to the final night at Kellerman's, and it's the end of the season talent show. And Johnny returns and he walks right up to the table where Baby is sitting with her mom and her dad. And he famously says, nobody puts Baby in a corner. And he pulls her up on the stage for a final dance that brings down the house.
Now, here's a fun trivia tidbit. That iconic line, nobody puts Baby in a corner, almost didn't make it into the movie. It was a last-minute addition that became one of the most famous lines in film history. And Patrick Swayze did not like it. And he didn't want to say it, and I don't blame him.
I don't blame him either, but it is a part of Americana now. Like if you say nobody puts Baby in a corner, everybody knows what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Well, the final dance sequence it's to our friend Donnie's song, The Time of My Life, and it is legendary.
It is.
The chemistry between Swayze and Gray is off the charts.
I have to say one thing here, because when they get on that stage, he starts out their dance by pointing to her and then using his pointy finger like to signal her to move toward him. And he does that several times throughout the film. Even the first time he meets her, he does. In that when they're he uses his finger. Every time he does that, oh my gosh, like I melt.
No, me too. It's so good. It's so good.
And I will say everything about this scene is perfect.
It is. At the same time, it's like super cringe.
Yes, it is definitely cringeworthy, but it is perfect. And here's some trivia for you. That final lift at the end of that song, once he jumps down and does his jive moves, right? That final scene, the lift, Jennifer Grey did it only one time. It was done in one take, Amanda, and that's it. And it's become one of the most reenacted dance moves in film history, right? It's been recreated time and time again, as we said earlier, in swimming pools from the lake scene, right? Swimming pools and lakes across the globe.
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere that that was the only time she did it because she was really afraid to do it.
She really was afraid. And I saw a little snippet of her talking about it, and she said she couldn't have done it with anybody but Patrick because she had complete trust that he would catch her when she jumped. But it was a one and done, baby.
But it was perfect.
It was perfect.
That's just another like serendipitous thing, like from what we heard from our friend Donnie about the song and just the way they got cast and it's just really everything came together so perfectly. Speaking of that lift, it's also in one of our favorite more modern movies. It's in Crazy Stupid Love.
Stupid Love, yes.
When Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone did the lift, it was his pickup move for girls.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And I think it just goes to show that this movie has had that ripple effect over the years. And so what we'll say is there you have it. The story of my favorite movie from the 80s, Dirty Dancing. Okay, Amanda, I have a question. Do you ever wonder like what happened the next day?
Yeah, I mean, the dad made up with Johnny.
Yeah, and everything just seemed happy and perfect. Boy, gosh, I would have loved a sequel to this movie, but did you know they offered Patrick Swayze $5 million to do a sequel? And he said no because he didn't like sequels.
I did not know that. And I believe 5 million would have changed my mind. And I totally asked him if I ever thought about what happened at the end. Yes. I always assumed that that Johnny just went off with Baby to join the Peace Corps.
I don't think they let you take partners with you to join the Peace Corps, right? I don't know. But no sequel, Amanda.
No sequel, but maybe it's better this way, sister. Maybe it's better. So, what are your thoughts? Does it stand the test of time?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, I love it more now than I loved it then. And I think it is because I have such an appreciation of how simple it was, but yet how just dynamic it was. And the music, to me, the movie is perfection. As I said earlier, it does have its cringeworthy moments, but it's perfection. But I want to say, Amanda, can we talk about the fashion in the movie for a second? Talk about standing the test of time.
Absolutely. I mentioned
I want to go order some of the things that they had on. I'm like, searching Amazon for it.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that white top she had on in that scene, that little V-neck with the pattern. And this was huge with the long knee-length cut-off jeans.
My best friend from high school and college, Dana, and we had them in multiple colors.
Yeah, and you rolled them up just a little bit. This is Keds exploded. Everybody wore Keds.
Everybody wore Keds.
Right, the boat neck tops, just really.
The A-line dresses where it's like fit and flare. Oh, I love it. I love them so much. I loved the fashion in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. That was another really big part of the movie, besides just the movie itself and the music that was so popular. The fashion really took hold as well.
Yeah.
Well, I would definitely say that it did stand the test of time, or does stand the test of time. It was the first movie to sell over 1 million VHS copies, and we were owners.
Yes, we were. And
Well,
that sucker got played over and over and over again.
Proud owners of that.
Yes.
It was played a lot. All right, y'all, join us next time on Real Sisters Rewind back to the 80s as we explore another favorite from the greatest decade of movies. Before we go, here are 3 clues about the next movie.
Okay, I have the first clue, Amanda.
Go.
This movie was released in one of the biggest years for movies in the 1980s, and it spoke to a whole generation.
I love that clue.
Okay.
Clue number two. It was written and directed by John Hughes.
And clue number 3 is another film with a chart-topping #1 soundtrack.
As so many were in the 80s.
Yes.
Any guesses, y'all? We'll reveal it in our next episode. Until then, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Missy. Thanks for listening to Real Sisters Rewind, back to the 80s.
And don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget, we're dropping an extra episode, our bonus episode, our wonderful interview, full interview with Donald Markowitz.
It's incredible. All right, until then, love you, sister.
Love you too.